Jeff, thanks for being here with me today. Let me tell everyone who's watching a little bit about you. So today we're talking with Jeff Zwiers, who is a master teacher of communication. He has so many books out. I tried to count. I think there's 8, but I know there's another one in the works, all on supporting students in communicating. Also, just know that he is a senior researcher at the Stanford Graduate School of Education and the director of professional development for Understanding Language, which is a research and professional learning project that's focused on improving instruction and assessment of all students, with an extra emphasis on serving the needs of linguistically and culturally diverse learners. He consults nationally and internationally in order to promote language, literacy, lesson design, and informational teacher development projects that promote language. Right now, he is focusing on developing classroom instruction that fosters rich communication and productive academic conversations across disciplines. And I just also want to say he's a father of 2 and a really great guy all around. So I'm so happy that you're here with us. And we're just going to talk about, especially at this time, how we can really support authentic conversation, especially during remote learning times.
Mhm, mhm.
So maybe what we could do is start off just by just sharing some reasons that like we as educators would want to build that conversational capacity with students. I know that there's so many reasons, but I always like to start with why to ground all of the other things that we'll talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think, as I've been asked this question often, sometimes it's just, oh yeah, because you have to be good at conversation, but there's a lot of deeper reasons for that. I mean, one thing I would even ask back rhetorically would be, what do conversations do, right? So what, and have we thought about all the conversations we've had in our lives, and what have they done for us, right? And sometimes we don't realize all the things they've done. One thing, of course, well, actually, you think about a world without conversations, um, and actually, in some cases, we are seeing, in some places, a world without good conversations. And one of the things we need to improve is, I would say that our students who grow into adults and leaders who have these high quality, powerful conversations. Um, and so and that kind of leads into the critical thinking aspect of it, that conversations can help us think critically as we bounce ideas off of each other. It can help us They can help us build language, of course, and the more conversations we have with others, the more we hear different ways of expressing ideas and the different ways of just thinking about the world, right? So we can build relationships with them. We can build empathy. We understand how a wide range of others think. And I've seen a lot of classrooms that haven't had a lot of conversation time, or if they have, they've had pair shares with one person the whole time who happens to be next to you. And I think that's been, in a way, I'll even call it the word a tragedy for a lot of students who have not had that exposure and mixing and relationship building with a variety of others in the world. And so and that's what we need, right? When you get into classes later on in wherever, middle school, high school, college, and then um, into the world of work, you don't really have a choice. There's a wide range of people. They're older, they're younger, they're diverse. And so the more we can, and we know people who are good at this, and we know people who are bad at this, right? That can really build relationships across the range. So that's, I would say those are some of the, I'll get into later, I'll get into the idea of collaborative argument rather than competitive argument, which, we're seeing a lot of competitive argument out in the world these days, but that's another area that I think we need to work on, especially. And that's what conversations can do when everything is kind of set up for them.
Yeah. So then getting started with supporting students with conversation, can you tell us a little bit about how you frame and present content so that conversational skills develop?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that really helps is a culture or a foundation or even call it a mindset of authentic communication in the classroom. So it's not just conversation is authentic, but everything we do with language is authentic. And by authentic, and I know there's different definitions of authentic out there. I tend to focus in on these three features of authenticity. One is that they build up one or more ideas. So you're actually doing something with information, whether it's facts or whatever, or thinking skills, and you're doing something with those in order to build up concepts or claims, something that's important in the discipline that will last. One of the things I'm not a fan of, and many of you aren't either, are the memorize for the test, memorize a bunch of disconnected things for a test, whether it's skills or facts, and then forget it 3 days later. So this is a little bit more about how do we set up in this classroom we build up ideas. So that would be kind of the mantra. And then whether if I'm reading something, I'm reading to build up an idea, right, in my mind about something, right? It could be what happened at a surface, or it could be a deeper like lesson, moral, or theme, but I'm not doing it to get tested on my comprehension. I'm doing it to build up something in my head, right? And writing is the same way. I think you talked about writing last week, and the authenticity of communicating through writing, not just to get my points on a rubric, but to actually build up an idea in someone else's head, or change their mind, or make a difference with my writing, not just to get points for it, right? So and then if we extend that into conversation, the idea is that these conversations help me build up an idea, and I help others. So it's kind of both a selfish and non-selfish or altruistic sense, that I'm helping you build up your idea, and then vice versa. And maybe we're helping the whole class build up some kind of more of a class-based idea. Often in the end, instead of a test where you have a multiple choice choosing whatever, you have some kind of performance or product, right, where you show that idea. So that idea turns into you communicate that idea that you've built up in the end. So I know that my conversation doesn't just end here. In a sense, I'm leveraging it or valuing it as a part of this idea building toward the end of the unit, or the end of the year, or the end of my life. Right. So it's this long-term sense, and I don't see that enough, right, in a lot of the classrooms that I've been into, at least in the last 10 years or so. So I think those are a couple ways to do that.
Mhm.
The conversation skills that I tend to focus on, you mentioned conversation skills, are the first one is sort of I call it the contractor skill of building up an idea.
Mhm.
It's a little bit more of a meta conversation skill. It's I'll give you an example. So if two students are talking, and one student says, I don't think we have enough evidence yet. That's sort of realizing that we still have to do something else to build, right? So it's a little bit of this is what we need, right? Like kind of like a contractor would say, well, we need more pipe fixtures for this, for finishing whatever, the kitchen. And so that's a little more meta, a little more umbrella. And then the other ones are fairly common. One is just posing a relevant idea, and I'll do the hand motions. Posing a relevant idea, clarifying, right? Clarifying the terms, because we don't always mean the same things when we're talking, even though kids sometimes will just assume that everyone understands what they're saying. And then supporting the idea, which is also this. And then that often includes evidence from the text, evidence from your own life, that kind of thing. And then when you're arguing, you're actually building up both ideas, and then you're evaluating between the two. You're choosing which one's heavier based on evidence, and ideally you're being objective when you're weighing that evidence against each other, right?
Yes.
Um,
Would you recap that again, and I'll just the hand motions, because I
yeah,
think
so
that's something.
the
Okay.
building, right? That's just
Uh-huh.
the kind of the overall, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And then the clarify,
Uh-huh.
right? Put clarify,
Okay.
support. And I often
Okay.
show that kids, you know, you need more than one piece of support or your
Yeah.
tabletop will fall, right?
Yes.
Um, and then the evaluating would be
Yeah.
when you're in an argument,
Nice.
right? And
Yeah.
then I thought there was another skill, but I forgot it already. So,
Yeah.
oh, the posing, right?
Oh, yes, that's right. The posing.
Right.
Yes.
So there's posing the initial idea. And this is
Hmm.
also important because you don't want kids to spend a lot of conversation. Conversation time is precious, right?
Right.
You don't want them to spend it on a so-so idea or a non-really buildable idea. You
Yeah.
want it to be a meaty idea. Ideally, they choose the ideas that we want them to build in the class, right? And that doesn't always happen, but it's still, you know, it gives them some agency. And I do want to mention a little bit about agency as well, because I think um, what happens in conversations is sometimes, especially in a paired conversation, two kids can start to get into it and start to feel that, hey, I'm really, we're really building up this thing that wasn't there before together, right? And you're pushing me to clarify, you're pushing me to support, and vice versa. And we're actually building up this idea. And I'm even using examples from my own life, right? And that's another thing that I think is really important and powerful. It's not just a text to self connection. You hear that. It's actually using those building blocks and those experiences, that you have to form this new idea because you're getting some other input from this other person. So I want to emphasize that. And I also want to emphasize along those lines that another feature of authentic communication is there's an information gap, meaning that um, you have something that I don't know and that I need or want, and vice versa. Right. So if we read the same story and we're just pulling out, oh yeah, I had that one too, I had that one too, there isn't much of a conversation if we're not really benefiting from each other's other knowledge. But if we have that, then oh yeah, you're helping me build I'm going to listen, I'm going to push you to clarify, what do you mean by that? Oh, can you tell me how that example supports the idea, right? Instead of just us kind of sharing, a lot of pair shares are like that, right? I share my idea, you share the same thing.
Yeah. Right.
And then we look up at the teacher.
Yes.
Um, so I think those features, building up an idea, clarifying and supporting, is just all around, all over, and information gaps are important as we set up, a situation for these authentic conversations,
Yeah.
to thrive.
Yeah. And especially giving students those options of where they can go in their conversation so that it
Mhm.
continues. Like you said, that very often they'll like say the same thing and then turn back. But now you've given them not just what to say, but also how to build ideas that we as teachers couldn't imagine even coming from,
Mhm.
couldn't anticipate, because this is their own authentic, original, and real conversation. That's
Right,
so
right.
practical, and also really like there's this a beautiful simplicity about it, that it makes it practical but also really helpful in digging deep
Mhm.
and creating that communication. So
And even right now, it's a little bit meta, but even right now, people who are listening to this or watching it, um, they're adding, hopefully, some new things. They don't have to be, not everything is new, but there might be some new nuggets or new ways of thinking about it, or new insights that add to. It's not, this isn't brand new, but a lot of a lot of teachers have this notion, oh, conversations are helpful. Oh, okay, here are some more reasons, or practice. So there's that adding, and it's got an authentic purpose because we care about our students and we want to do the best we can for our students. So I'm building up this idea about conversation in my classroom, or remote conversations. I'm building up this idea of how to do it as well, as because there is this authentic, I'd say, performance slash product at the end of it. If it were just to take a test right now, I don't think people would be listening as much. some people might even, they wouldn't be taking notes if people are taking notes.
Yeah.
But because of that, because there's this authentic, goal that has some meaning, a meaningful difference, then more is going to happen. It's the same for our students, right? It's the same for our students. So if they feel that agency of, oh, I'm doing this, it's going to make a difference, in my mind, or it's going to make a difference in someone else, rather than just, okay, I guess I'll have this conversation, I'll say a few sentence frames, and I'll get my points for it. There's a big difference, right?
Yeah.
And I'll just add a couple things. The if we can have a conversational mindset, right, which really is, and this is pretty radical if you think about it, but if a kid walks into a conversation, or turns into a conversation and is thinking, okay, we're going to build up these ideas as strongly and as clearly as possible. That's very different than what a lot of kids are thinking. They're not thinking as strong and clear as possible, because they're often thinking bare minimum for the amount of points I have set for what I want to get out of this, right? There's a lot of that, because conversations take a lot of energy. They really do, right? There's a lot of listening and a lot of speaking, and it takes mental energy. So the less I can get away with, if it doesn't have meaning beyond the conversation, I'm just going to do the bare minimum. So I think that's one of the things that is important. I'll push you. Another part of the mindset is I'll push partners and I'll push myself to clarify and support ideas as much as possible. And also, I think another aspect would be conversations help me learn. I'm not sure how many kids right now think that. They're not thinking, even if I'm talking, I am learning by talking, right? And so I think those types of, those aspects of a mindset can really help, because a lot of kids are thinking, fill in the blank, get my points. And that's very different than build up an idea with another person as much as possible, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then with that experience that you're describing, because of that type of conversation, because it is that authentic, there's something that happens inside students, in their hearts and in their minds. And I know it's scientific in many ways, but they feel what they've learned. They feel this elevation of understanding. And because of that, they're more likely to show back up again for conversation and see the value of it, right?
Exactly.
So it's
Yeah.
like bringing everyone back. So I think we probably never realized that for conversations on some type of platform like ours, like we're using Zoom right now, or in a classroom setting that is either hybrid or fully remote, I mean, that requires some tweaking of conversational skills, or maybe an additional kind of skill set, or like facilitation on the part of the teacher. So do you
Right.
have some tips for us on how we can foster those authentic conversations that you just described? Because it's so inspiring, and it makes me, and I'm sure everyone who's listening, to do better with that. But how do we go ahead and do that still in this virtual world?
Yeah, and that's been a huge question, in the last 6 months, especially. And I've seen some successful, some successful conversations happen at all grade levels. But it's tough, because a lot of times, you'll get this kind of surface level, or we're done, or I get distracted from something at home, right? Or the internet cuts out or whatever. But let's say you've got, two kids and the internet's working. A lot of the strategies to help that not be surfacey and to not stop are similar to in the classroom. It's really, I mean, the more we work on those, the aspects of the purpose of the conversation, the skills, right? Because, number one would be if the kids see a value in talking to another kid. So the topic might be really engaging, or the final product or purpose might be engaging as well. I mean, those are big, right? That now the second reason is they don't realize that they can ask for clarification and ask for support more than once. They a lot of kids, don't see the need, and so they won't ask for. if you mention the word freedom, for example, in something you're saying, um, I might just think, okay, freedom. Yeah. Okay. I get it. No, but your idea of freedom is very different. Your examples are going to be very different of freedom than what I'm thinking right now. So I have to have the habit when I hear those words that are important words that might have different meanings, I need to ask you. Even if I think I already know it, sort of, if I can have that habit, if I can build that in kids, right? If we can build that in kids, but if I have that habit as a conversational partner, then amazing things are going to happen. I mean, because you're going to describe different examples, maybe from your life or from what you've read or seen on TV or whatever, and that's going to add to my concept of freedom, and especially it'll add to whatever you're talking about, right? That freedom was just a word in within a term that you said, and it can really expand and deepen the conversation. So, and the same thing with support, right? I might think that you might give one example. Oh yeah, that supports it. But if I say, well, is there another example? Not really trying to pressure you per se, but it's more of a like, can we come up with another example from the text or from life, and to really try to support that. And I'm not really trying to put you on the spot, but it's more of a we thing, right?
Mhm.
So, and I think that turning again, it's turning that around um, from the memorizing and filling it, because that's a really strong mentality about learning. It's more of it's a kind of a student pedagogy. That's how students think learning is, and if we don't change that somewhat, then it's going to be a problem, because they'll just keep on doing the same old, right?
Right.
Um, same old meaning, and I call it pseudo communication.
Yeah.
Some of the things I've written, and the pseudo communication is just using language for points or for kind of these extrinsic reasons, rather than what we've been talking about building ideas, right? Um, and so I think, and the last thing I think that mentioned in the question, well, one was voice. So you have you build up a sense of voice when you are just trying out your ideas on others constantly, every day. Kids should have a short conversation, ideally a long conversation, but at least a short conversation with one or two others about something meaningful, right? And that would be one, just that's the kind of the quantity aspect of it. And I know that's a little hard to manage, and you might not get 100% all the time, especially when you're doing remote instruction. But if you can set up somewhat of a schedule for kids to be meeting with each other, and it might not have to be a different kid every day, but at least there's a topic that they could talk about. Um, and just setting that up. So have a 5-minute conversation. Often it'll go longer,
Mhm.
right? Because they'll think, okay, well, 5 minutes, I can do 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then they might get into it. And then of course, recording those ideally. And one of the advantages of remote instruction is that you can get these recordings and you can watch way more than you might be able to observe in a classroom while kids are talking in pairs, right? Um, So yeah, so I think those are a couple things. You can have a graphic organizer that I often use. It's called like an idea building visual or an idea building blueprint. It's basically the idea on the top, and then building blocks below it. So you could use Post-its, you could use any, but sometimes if kids have that ready and they walk into a conversation, they have stuff to share. It's not just all from their head.
Mhm.
It helps us too. It's just kind of like note taking.
Yeah.
But then they can add notes from their partner. They can say, oh yeah, well, we talked about this. My partner had this example from her life. I'm going to add it into my idea, whatever visual that I have. So those types of graphic organizers can help as well. And then they can just, put it up to the screen, take a picture of it, and send it to you send it to you, the teacher, just to take a look at, if you don't have time to listen to all the conversations. Let's see. One thing I did want to, when you mentioned critical thinking, I wanted to circle back to the argumentation piece.
Mhm.
And one of the things that we see a lot out in the world, is this competitive argumentation. It's not even that high quality competitive argumentation, really,
Mhm.
but it's more like biased argumentation. And so one of the things that I've been working with a lot of teachers on is getting students to seek the truth rather than to win, right? So that's it's kind of that mantra of, don't just make a semi-informed decision, pick a side and then try to argue for it tooth and nail. Build up both sides before you decide, right? So you build up both sides with, as well as possible without, ideally without bias. You still, in the end, might have certain values that would shape your evaluation of the evidence, right? For example, like regarding airport security. Well, I value privacy, more, and I value, security on the plane more, or something like that. So there's these, but at the very least, in the beginning, before you do that evaluation, you build up both ideas, right? So you build up both ideas using clarifying and supporting, and then ideally you use criteria, and this is part of the critical thinking, criteria to decide, well, how much do these things weigh and which side weighs more? And you'd have a discussion about it, and then sometimes two kids will disagree, and I say, oh, interesting, you disagree, can you tell me why? And then they have to articulate their different values, and then you've still got this, this discussion that happens, and it's quite, it needs to be respectful, but it's usually pretty meaty because kids haven't just, run into a debate situation right away, right? They're going back and forth, they're pushing each other to clarify and support, and ideally, as much as possible, they park it in the back of their brain, right? Their initial their initial opinion or decision.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yes. It's all really helpful, because I think what we're seeing here, and as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about, conversation has been part of the building block of relationships, society, all, those conversations that have happened throughout history have been pivotal. Now we're at a point where technology is becoming very involved in conversation. And what you're doing is you are bringing what's been traditionally important into this new platform, this new setting, so to speak, and you're showing us how to keep both, both not only simple, but to maximize both sides of that coin. Because I really think, as we look to our future, that this time that we're spending, where so much of our conversations and connections with one another are through virtual platforms, it's going to be so needed, not just right now, not just in this present time for students of all ages, but this is, quote unquote, flattening the world a bit, right? Where we're going to be and need to draw upon these strong skills that you're describing. So this conversation is so important. And I also really look forward to the book that you're currently wrapping up, which is Distance. I don't know if you have a working title for it now, but it's about conversation and distance learning.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And I think that that's going to be one of those classics in education because of the fact that it's a new expectation of people now. So
yeah, it's and it's, I mean, just even before we final end, some of that that book and some of the stuff I've been working on with teachers is really working on developing conversation skills in non-conversation activities or structured interactions or reading and writing. And so it's and it's happened already in writing quite a bit, where you're asked to clarify this, elaborate, you're asked to support your points, but we haven't often really pushed kids in pair shares to clarify and support ideas, or even in their reading. There is some, questioning the author and questioning the text activities, which are great. But and the more we can get kids to ask the text, oh wait, how effective is this piece of evidence that you shared in this article, right? That kind of mentality where I'm really pushing to clarify and pushing to support can help. In fact, I don't think the conversation time is enough, and it's all often in real time to build those skills and habits. It's a little bit like a basketball practice, right? Where you practice drills and it's in preparation for the scrimmage or the game.
Yeah.
And this is a similar thing where you might be practicing while reading or practicing while writing, but it transfers over into that 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 mindset of conversation where, oh yeah, we're building up an idea and I need to clarify and support as much as possible, right? So that's one thing. The other thing that I just have in my notes here, just briefly, is with the online conversations or the remote conversations, we really should model, almost do extra modeling of facial expressions, eye contact, um, valuing others' ideas, using kind of back channeling. So there are ways, because we can watch their recorded conversations, to actually look and say, oh, you know what? I really like the way you said, I agree, or exactly, or uh-huh. You really showed that you were actively listening, right? So I think there are chances with this remote instruction to do that. Um, and it's highly necessary, because we've all seen um, people being distracted on the other end of the line, or whatever.
Yeah.
And the final thing would be, I don't know how often people are using written conversations online, these written discussions, these discussion boards. But there's a couple things. One is you can get involved in them. Another thing is you can actually just analyze them and see, are people building up an idea here? Are they arguing respectfully and collaboratively versus competitively? Usually you see the competitively and the biased ways, in a lot of these little one-shot posts. But it's possible to actually build up, conversation skills through a written way, and then you have a nice record of it. Even if you have it just within your classroom, you could have this ongoing written. Some kids will share a lot writing that they might not share orally, but that could actually help them eventually with the oral stuff. So I know it's kind of a couple things just tacked on at the end there, but I wanted to make sure they got in there.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate, and I know everyone who will have the opportunity to listen to this will be just like me, walking away with not only inspiration, but also really practical ideas to really support this essential skill of conversation and building that conversational capacity. Yes, we need it
Yeah,
now more than ever. So thank you. Thanks for
yeah,
sharing with us.
yeah, no problem. Yeah, my pleasure.